This is a 1970 FLH Electra Glide. It's been sleeping for about a decade. It's time to wake it up. So let's talk a little bit about the bike. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a 1970 FLH Electra Glide. This is the first year of the cone Shovelhead as well. A customer of mine recently purchased this motorcycle from the family of the deceased owner. And as you can tell from looking at this thing, it's in really nice shape, but it's been sitting basically unloved for about a decade. And so he brought it to me just to sort of get this thing going and back on the road. We don't think this is an original paint job, though it does look pretty nice. The first place I needed to start with this motorcycle was just getting it out from underneath my lean-to. This is a fairly heavy bike and the ground's a little bit soft, but my biggest issue here with pushing it was the fact that the back brake is locked up on this bike. I finally was able to figure out some weird way of turning around and pushing against it while using my back to steer the handlebars. This was honestly kind of miserable by myself, but no big deal. The next place I wanted to go was checking the oil tank. Didn't know if this bike had oil in it or not, and was pleasantly surprised to find that it did have oil in the tank that actually looked fairly clean, though one of the oil lines down to the oil pump was plugged off. So this was a fairly simple repair, if you can even call it a repair. Just hook the line back up and make sure everything's tight and not leaking. After I had done that, it was time to put a battery in it. Customer brought me a brand new battery, and just for good measure, I left it on the charger overnight. Which is something that I pretty much always do with batteries. You'd be surprised how many brand new batteries aren't actually charged. Then I did a quick test with the ignition switch. Found that we had functioning headlights, but the turn signals were stuck on this bike. The left turn signal came on at first, then the right signal stayed on. I went ahead and walked into my shop and got out a compression tester. This is always a good place to start when working on any old bike that you don't know the history of. I gathered up a few tools, went back outside, and then, like anything else, we're going to pull the spark plugs out, install the compression tester, spin the thing over with the throttle open. I also verified that the spark plugs were indeed firing. We actually got some very nice numbers, right around 90 to 100 psi, with only about a 5 psi difference between front and rear cylinders. Then I went ahead and pulled the air cleaner off. This motorcycle is still equipped with the factory Bendix Zenith carburetor, which I thought was kind of interesting. So on a whim, I decided to feed it some fuel and see what happened. Once I had it running, at least somewhat, I opened the doors to my building and moved some bikes around. At the time, I had my Ironhead in the building as well as my orange Shovelhead, so I moved them around to make room for this customer's motorcycle. Then got to do what I don't get to do often, which is ride a motorcycle into this building. Oftentimes they're getting pushed in because they don't run. Once we were inside the building, it was time to get the bike up on the lift. This is always kind of a chore by yourself, and I always recommend strapping a motorcycle down to the jack. If you're going to do this, it just makes it a little more stable and a little more safe. With the bike secured, time to go reading. Everything we've done up to this point in time has kind of just been out of my head. And so I grabbed the factory shop manual. I wanted to get working on the back brakes first. That was pretty important to me. Going's good, but stopping's better. I tried to do the factory procedure for adjusting the brake shoes, though I found this didn't make a difference, and the only way I could get the wheel to spin was by loosening the already fairly loose backing plate nut and axle nut itself. The next morning I walked outside with a cup of coffee, spilled some, and my dog drank a little, just what he needs, caffeine, and spent a little bit of time with a caliper measuring to make sure that I had the right brake shoes for the brake drum. Everything checked out there okay, but you can see in this brake drum where it's been rubbing both on the inside of the drum and around the outside. Also look at those rivets on the back of the sprocket. Those have been rubbing on the backing plate too. I ended up pulling the drum completely out of the wheel while Kenneth spent some time sweeping up the shop. He helps me a lot sometimes out there. So I decided to pause on the brakes for a few minutes. I wasn't really getting anywhere on it. I hadn't found anything yet that didn't measure right or didn't seem correct, though I was pretty suspicious the backing plate was warped, and I decided to move to fixing the electrical gremlins inside of this bike. The first place I started was with taking the auxiliary lights off of the front and then opening up our headlight nacelle so we could access all of the wiring. I'll admit I was a little bit nervous doing this. You never know what you're going to find with wiring. There's always the chance that previous owner or owners have gone full-on meth head inside of the bike and done a terrible job of wiring it. And yes, I realize I didn't need to actually remove the headlight the way that I did. I screwed that up. Anyways, I found what was actually a pretty good looking wiring. A few scotch locks here and there, but nothing crazy. Did a little bit of electrical testing, pulled the switches out of the handlebars, found a few terminals with some bad solder on them and a couple of bad connections in a few places, fixed everything up, and then we were able to do a light check, which you see me doing here. Both turn signals, as well as headlights and high beams and brake lights. Everything's working great the way it should now. It's always a nice feeling when you can diagnose and repair electrical issues, especially considering I had less than 2 hours in the electrical diagnostics and repair. I got the wheels ready to get new tires put on. The customer was going to come pick those up from me, and then I went ahead to service the bike. We drained the engine oil, did transmission oil, and also changed the engine oil filter, as well as taking some time to drain what little bit of gas was left in these tanks. These tanks actually looked amazingly clean inside, had been stored correctly, and needed very little cleaning, which was great. So it's about a week and a half later. The customer brought me back the wheels with new tires installed and the correct 67 to 72 backing plate to replace the warped 63 to 66 one that was on it. I still couldn't get this to spin freely, however. You see I've rigged up some spacers, and this worked to stop the drum from bottoming out the wheel bearings on the backing plate, but I was not happy with this. I ended up coming back out here at night after everyone in my family had gone to bed, and I took this all apart, changed the spacer inside of the wheel since this was an aftermarket wheel, put it all back together correctly by the book, set my chain line, and centered the wheel and the fender and the swing arm, and found everything was good now. I was able to turn the wheel over and stop the rear tire with the foot brake. Obviously I had to bleed the brakes, so I'm pretty happy with this. I had a ton of hours in figuring this out. Someone had been in here changing all kinds of stuff and just not really knowing what they were doing. Threw a new points cover on this. These little finishing touches always feel good. And then walked to the other side of the bike and made a shift linkage adjustment. I found that while I've been messing with this thing, I couldn't get it out of first gear. It was rubbing on the primary and the shift linkage was adjusted incorrectly. I ended up having to make a few more adjustments later after I rode the bike, but I didn't film any of that. After that, I installed the bracket that goes between the saddlebag mounts. I actually had one of these sitting on the shelf, and this bike was missing it when it came in. So I closed the trapdoor fender on this thing, and it was time to put it back to earth. This is always a great feeling to me. It's just nice knowing that you can kind of start to see the light at the end of the tunnel on a project, whether it's your own or something for a customer's. It's not even so much that I get excited about, hey, I'm done with the job, now I get paid. As it is, I'm excited to just be a part of getting another vintage Harley Davidson back on the road where it belongs versus collecting dust in somebody's barn. The next morning I dropped Kenneth off at school, came back home, opened the shop up, and wheeled this little Electra Glide back out into the daylight for the first time in a few weeks. I've kind of fallen in love with this little bike in the time that it's been here, and I've gotten to be friends with the owner, which is pretty cool too. This really is a nice little time capsule of a motorcycle, and I'm always excited when I get to turn that switch and start a bike up and take it down the road for the first time. I'll be quiet now and just let y'all enjoy the sounds of a 55-year-old Shovelhead that's happy to be back in the wind. So we're going to end this episode right here. This has been filmed in a little bit different style than what I usually do my YouTube episodes in. Hopefully it was a little more cinematic, perhaps a more relaxing pace. It'll end up being a little bit of a shorter episode just because I didn't go into, absolute minute detail over every last little thing that was done to get this bike back on the road after sitting for over a decade. This thing sat so long that I noticed when I was riding it, there was actually like a sunburned mark on the instrument cluster on the speedometer where the needle had rested at 0 for so long. And I'd like to do some more videos in this fashion, like in this style on this channel, so let me know if this is something y'all enjoyed. I think while sometimes having all the detail and all the information is useful and helpful if you're trying to watch a video to learn how to fix your bike, sometimes it's also nice to just sort of slow down and let it be more about, kind of the vibe of it all, as the kids say these days. Just the feeling and the calm and the peace that working on and riding one of these old Harleys brings. So I've got plenty of other work to do today. Appreciate each and every one of you who watches this channel. Bye.